Here we're going to talk about multiplying polynomials or binomials. And so one type of question you'll see be something like 4x squared y times x cubed plus xy minus y squared. And remember, when you have something like this, 4xy, this is multiplication, 4 times x squared times y, and you're multiplying 4x squared y times this whole polynomial, which is inside the parentheses. The way that you do this kind of a problem is through the distributive property. So if you don't know what the distributive property is, watch the video on mathematical properties. So we're just going to distribute this whole thing through each one of these factors. So according to the distributive property, we do 4x squared y times x cubed. Remember, when you write things in parentheses, that means multiplication. So 4x squared y times x cubed, the way that you multiply these together is for the variables that are the same. So here we have an x, and here we have an x. Then when they have an exponent, when you're multiplying, you just add those exponents. So here we have 4x squared y times x cubed. So there's no other numbers. There's actually a 1 out here, right? Because there's always a 1 in front if there's nothing, but we generally don't write it. So 4 times 1 is just 4. So the number is just 4. X squared, here we have an x. So x squared times x cubed, we just add the exponents. So the exponents are 2 and 3. So 2 plus 3 is 5. Y, there's no other y. So remember again, if there's no exponent, there's really a 1 up here. We just don't write the 1. Everyone just understands that there is a 1. So since there's no other y, you just leave that as it is. So for the first factor, we have 4x to the 5th y. Then we're going to add on. We're going to do 4x squared y. Again, this first term, we're going to distribute it through this term times xy. So again, 4, there's no other number, so 4 times 1 is just 4. Here we have an x squared and an x. Remember, there's actually a 1 up here that we just don't write. So we have x, and we combine the x's, so we have x squared times x1. So we just add the exponents, 2 plus 1. That gives us 3. Then we have y. Here we do have another y. So we have y times y. Remember, there's a 1 here. So we write the y down, and we just add the exponents. 1 plus 1 is y squared. Then we're going to do the last bit here. So 4x squared y. Again, we're just doing the distributive property times, this is negative y squared. So here, now we're looking at this one. This is really negative 1 times y squared. So 4 times negative 1 is negative 4. So we're going to write a minus 4. X squared, there is no x's over here, so we just write down x squared again. And then we have y, remember there's a 1 up here, times y squared. So we just again write down y and add the exponents. 1 plus 2 is 3. So this is the answer to this multiplication. 4x to the 5th y plus 4x to the 3rd y squared minus 4x squared y to the 3rd. And all you're doing is you just match up the variables. So if you have an x and an x, when you're multiplying, you add the exponents. It's a simple addition. So 2 and 3 gives you 5. If there is no other variable, then you just write it down. So here was a y, you just write down the y. Here we had x squared times x, so that was 2 plus 1, gave us an x cubed. Here we had y times y, which is a 1 plus 1, which gave us a y squared. Remember to watch your signs. If it's a negative, then you have to write down a minus. And then x squared, there was no other x here, so we just write it down. Y times y squared is 1 plus 2 is y to the third. The other type of question you're going to get is to multiply what are called binomials, something like this. Now you can explicitly do this through the distributive property, but there's actually something, a little mnemonic that makes it, I think, a little bit easier. It's called FOIL. First, outside, inside, last. When you have something like this, where there's just two components to the binomial or even a polynomial, you can use this thing called FOIL. First, outside, inside, last. And all that means is just a easier way to do the multiplication. So first, you take the first part of each of the parentheses and you multiply them together. So here we have x is the first part, and here again we have x. So what's x times x? Well, remember there's really a 1 up here for its exponent. When you're multiplying these together, you're just adding the exponents. So we have 1 plus 1 is 2. So x times x is x squared. Then you take the outside part. So here, when we're talking about these two, they're on the outside of the whole expression. So the outside, we have x, and then this is on the outside, 3. So what's x times 3? It's just 3x. There's nothing more you can do with it. You just multiply them together, 3x. Inside, so we do the same thing. Now we're looking at the inside factors. So these are the outside, these are the inside. Here we have negative 2 times x. What's negative 2 times x is just negative 2x. And then you do the last. That means the last part in each of the parentheses. So here we have negative 2 times 3. That equals negative 6. So then to write out the answer, we put all this together. So we have x squared plus 3x. This was a negative 2, so minus 2x, and this was a minus 6. Now, if you remember when we were adding polynomials that video, here we can combine these, right? Because there's an x and there's an x. So 3x minus 2x just equals x. If you don't know how to do that, watch the part 1 video. So this becomes x squared plus x minus 6, because 3x minus 2x is x. So again, you remember it with FOIL, first, outside, inside, last. The first factors in each of the parentheses, you multiply those together. Then you look at the outside, which is the two ones furthest apart, x and 3. Then you look at the inside, the two that are closest together, negative 2 and x. And then you look at the last part of each parentheses. And you just multiply them together. If you can simplify this because you have like variables, then that's what you do. We'll do this again. Let's say we have x plus 4 times 3x plus 5. So again, first, f, x, this is the first in this parentheses, and the first here is 3x. What is x times 3x? Remember there's a 1 out here, so 1 times 3 is just 3. This is a 1 up here, and there's a 1 up here, so you write down the x, you add the exponents. 1 plus 1 is 2, so it's 3x squared. Outside, so we take this outside one, that outside one. X times 5 is just 5x. Then we look at the inside, so we're looking at the two closest ones. 4 times 3x. 4 times 3 is 12, so this is just 12x. Last, so you look at the last component of each of the parentheses, which is 4, and this is 5. Multiply those together. 4 times 5 is 20. So now we add all these together. 3x squared plus 5x plus 12x plus 20. We can simplify this because we can add 5x plus 12x. You just add those together. So the final answer is 3x squared plus 17x plus 20. I'm going to do one last one that involves minus signs. We have 2x minus 3 times 4x minus 1. First, 2x times 4x. 2 times 4 is 8. X times x is x squared. Outside, 2x times negative 1. 2 times negative 1 is negative 2x. Inside, this is a negative 3 times 4x. Negative 3 times 4 is negative 12. Negative 12x. Last, negative 3 times negative 1. Negative 3 times negative 1 is a positive 3. So then we just put this all together just like we did. 8x squared minus 2x minus 12x plus 3. We can simplify this because we can add these x's together. We're actually going to subtract them. 8x squared, negative 2 minus 12 is minus 14x plus 3. So that's how, whenever you have two factors and multiplying them together, you can use FOIL, first, outside, inside, last.